Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Greetings, everybody, to Heroes in Grief. Thank you for watching and listening again. And today I have Dr. Heather Taylor. She says she doesn't mind if we call her Heather, so we're going to call her Heather. But so funny because, as I've told you guys before, I'm part of a Stories of anthology. It's called Stories of Friends and Family Lost. I'm going to get that out. But it got released today, where the day we were recording this podcast. So, I did not even realize that you were part of that.
I also didn't realize you were part of it.
So we're on this live stream today for the release of the book, and there's Doc. And I go back, I look at my calendar, I'm like, oh, Heather's going to be on my podcast coming up. So yeah, it was about an hour or two ago we were doing that. So funny, very funny, but great to have you on. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you
very
for
much.
having me. I feel honored to be able to speak to this today, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's, all of us, like what was mentioned as we were talking there, that, it is an honor. It's an honor to share all of this stuff. And that's the weird thing, sometimes where it's like, wow, like we go through what we've gone through and the pain that we continue to experience. But it's an honor to be part of trying to help, get things out to help others. And so, I was processing a lot of that when we were doing that launch today and listening to people's stories and everything. And it really is. And, I want to apologize to you too, because your podcast is called Grief, the New Normal, right?
Grief is the new normal. Yes.
Grief is the new normal.
Yeah,
So for those of you that didn't see the live thing we're talking about, I said on there, I don't particularly like that term. But I think that comes from, I thought about that, and I think it just resonates with people sometimes because if you're taking a traumatic situation and now this is your new normal and you identify that way, that can be kind of, rub people the wrong way. And so I think that's probably what I gathered it from. I don't know. There's just little things sometimes that kind of like, okay, I probably wouldn't use that term or whatever for myself. But no, I totally understand why you might use that or whatever. But anyways, not here to talk about me and my thoughts. We want to learn about you and your story, if you don't mind sharing that, and then the wonderful things that you're doing and
Sure.
with the podcast and the other things that you're doing. So, ladies and gentlemen, Heather Taylor.
Thank you for having me, Tom. And I would actually, I'd love to speak to why I picked that name, actually.
Please.
I think we live in such a grief phobic, grief illiterate society, and yet grief is the most universal experience that we can have, whether it's from a death related loss or a non-death loss. And so in picking that phrase coming out of this post-pandemic space, it was more to help validate that grief is a normal experience and it really is part of our day-to-day language. And so it wasn't definitely, the intention was definitely not to minimize traumatic loss, which is what my experience was, but more to give ourselves permission that, like, no, this is a normal thing. It doesn't feel normal when we're in it. And that's because we've been so conditioned that we should feel shame or hide our grief, when really it's like, no, like, let's bring it into the light. Let's normalize talking about it.
I
Yeah.
love that turnaround on it. I really do. That's great.
Yeah.
And from a marketing standpoint, it's fantastic. No, that is a great way. I like that. I like that, things that play on something like that a little bit, and kind of take on a different meaning. That's great.
For sure. It's interesting. People really like it, or they have this very strong reaction to it. I was at the American Psychological Association's conference last year, and I did a booth and was trying to just build some awareness of my podcast to other clinicians. And it was very interesting, the individuals that had more of an averse reaction to it. But then I could get them talking, and we could talk about how normal grief really is, and it would turn them around. So thank you for
And that's like mission accomplished, right?
Yes,
That's
exactly.
great.
Exactly. But
Yes.
it's wanting to bring grief more into day-to-day conversations, because it is such a universal experience. So yeah. But
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. You know
yeah.
how I mentioned how I feel about that too.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like, I don't take it personally, because what's going to land and resonate for me is going to be different than what lands and resonates for others. And I think that's also part of the grief work, the grief education that we need to have, is how do we help people feel empowered to let their grief take up space, and that your grief is going to look different than my grief, and they're both valid and have equal weight and importance, and that it's okay that they look different.
Yeah. So what brought you into this world?
Yes. So I had a younger brother, Garrett, and he died quite traumatically and suddenly in 2009. He was 22. I was 24, and it absolutely changed my life. I had lost some grandparents previously and a couple friends, but nothing rocked my world quite as much as losing my brother.
Yeah.
And I know you shared on the live this morning that your son died from fentanyl. Is that correct?
Yes.
So
Yep.
my brother died from acute methadone intoxication. So yeah, so we didn't know he was using again, and yeah, so it was just quite a painful thing to live through, and watching my parents navigate that while also dealing with my own grief, figuring out what it meant to move forward without my brother here with me. We were really close all growing up, and I tried seeking support around the time. There wasn't really grief coaching back then, so I was like, well, I'll try therapy. And horrible experience. Horrible experience. I tried 3 different clinicians, and they didn't know what to do with me, because I don't know if you knew this, but in most clinical therapy training programs, there is not grief training. There is like a minor little lecture on Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of death and dying, and that's kind of it. And so so the therapist I went to, one, it was so bad, they had me watch a VHS tape on grief instead of talking with me about my person. And I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. Like, that actually happened. And I was like, am I allowed to swear on here? Okay.
What's that? Oh,
Am I
yeah.
allowed? Oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't know if it was a profanity free
Oh, yeah.
zone.
No, we let it out.
Okay. So basically, I was like, fuck this. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to become a therapist. And so that's because we have to be able to do this grief stuff better. So that's what I did.
Mm.
I got into a PsyD program, so a doctorate of counseling psychology program. And within my first semester, I was like, oh, they don't like, I'm looking at all the curriculum and everything, and there's no like classes on grief. So I connected with someone else and they're like, hey, you should volunteer with hospice. And so that's what I did. So I, um, went through their 40-hour bereavement volunteer training, and then I went through their additional 10-hour vigil volunteer training. And so for 4 years of my 5-year doctoral program, I would go to class from like 6 to 10 at night because it was designed for adults in the evening who work during the day. And then I would go sit vigil or do a bereavement visit either after class from like midnight to 4 a.m. Or I would do bereavement visits during the week with the families that I was supporting, and just got really invested in growing my understanding of grief across the spectrum. So I knew the lived experience of a traumatic loss, and I wanted to understand the slow goodbye, and just be better educated to help support the people that I wanted to work with. So
Yeah, we share that. We have a lot of commonalities coming through already here. I was a hospice spiritual care director for 3.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, long before Jeff passed. And so, yeah, I know that experience very well too, and a lot of that. And yeah, I've said that many times about in the curriculums for therapists and things that grief is an elective. It's not even something that's required, which was shocking.
Right.
I had a similar experience with one counselor. I went to one counselor. Judy and I did, but he talked to us separately at times too. And so, but I sat there, and about the third session, I was like, he's not getting to the depth of what I need. I know that. I could tell. And yeah, I think it's important to, from a professional level, to find out if they have experience or even just a life experience in it, but also if they're trained in it. But sometimes, I find the peer-to-peer groups and things like that can be very effective for people because of that shared experience too.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
talk a lot about how, when you've lived through that loss, that significant loss, it's like you're learning how to speak a new language. And so those peer-to-peer connections, I love doing grief support groups. I think they're so important. It's because you're with other people who speak this language, who understand how that feels internally to go through that loss, and are able to connect in a different way than people who haven't experienced that type of loss. And it's like you don't want to be in the club, but it's like once you're in the club, you speak a different language and you're able to connect with people in a different way. And I think having that blend of personal and professional is really important in being able to help my clients feel seen in processing their grief.
Yeah, that's incredible that you put it to work like that. And another thing you said too that I've mentioned so many times is keep pressing on. If one's not working for you, then find something else. Keep doing that. That's why we're putting all these resources out there, because there's things available to help you.
Yeah.
And it may not be right away. In fact, a lot of times it isn't. And you bounce around from thing to thing, and that's fine. Just keep going.
Yeah. Keep trying
Yeah.
different things because you don't know what's going to be the fit for you, right? Whether it's traditional talk
Yeah.
therapy or having a grief coach or cold plunges,
Yeah.
it's there's
Or a
so
podcast
right,
from somewhere, you don't know where you're going to pull it out of, whatever works for
right,
you.
right.
Yeah. Great. So how long ago was it? And what was your brother's name?
My brother's name was Garrett, and this
Oh, I'm sorry.
was
You did say that. I'm
no
sorry.
worries. And it was in 2009, so it'll be 16 years in November of this year.
Mm,
And I
hmm.
still think about him all the time. I have his pictures in my office, and it influences significantly the work that I do and how we talk about grief in our family system and honor grief anniversaries. And yeah,
Yeah. I didn't mention, and I've had multiple losses throughout my life. My dad
mm,
died when I was 10,
mm,
and a grandmother before that, and then a grandmother after that. My brother passed in 2008 as well.
mm.
He's 6 years older than me. I'm the youngest of 7 kids.
Oh, wow.
So he was 2 siblings away from me in age, in age wise. But, and my mother, also another grandmother or 2 grandmothers, mother, a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law, a nephew. So,
Wow.
several friends, of course. So yeah, well acquainted with that. And the sibling part of it is very important too, because it can be lost. And here's another similarity here. Now you were 2 years away from your brother, 2 years older. I have an adopted daughter, Jeffrey's sister, who is 2 years older than Jeffrey. So, and she has mentioned at times too that it's hard to find good assistance for a sibling. And now I
Yeah.
know there's a lot of resources out there now. There are, and I've had, I also had, her name's escaping me, but hers is called the Broken Pack. And, I'm so sorry. I can't remember her name right now, but I had her on the podcast, and it's all based around sibling loss. And that's a unique and those dynamics are unique, that are different to other grief a lot of times because of what you shared as siblings, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and siblings are often considered like the forgotten mourners, because the focus tends to be on the parent who lost the child, which is
Mm-hmm.
important and significant. And we're also losing someone we thought we were going to spend the rest of our lives with, that we would navigate aging and take care of parents. And, it's a different kind of loss. And there's even less resources out there for siblings. When I was trying to find books back then, to help me understand my experience and feel seen, and there just were very, very few books on sibling loss, and definitely no research studies on it. I'm a psychologist and had to do a dissertation, all the shebang there, and I did it on grief, looking at Facebook and mourning and the impact of social media on bereavement practices. And there were no research articles on sibling grief back when I was doing my dissertation. And it's, I haven't checked, PubMed these days, but it's, you look on the bookshelves, and that's not a grief that gets to take up a lot of space.
Yeah. And it's so true too, right? Because, I'm sure you experience this where people, the loss of a child, is considered to be one of the worst losses or
Yeah,
whatever. I
absolutely.
always battle against that because your loss is your significant loss. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
But I imagine people came up to your parents all the time or ask you even, how are your parents doing?
Mm-hmm.
And leaving you in the dust, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing happens.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
How that's painful. Oh my gosh.
I think I get a little soapboxy about like things to say and not say. And, how do we acknowledge space for both, right? And it's, you don't have to say the perfect thing, right? This isn't something to fix or rescue us from. We're in pain, and when we see someone in pain, we want to alleviate that pain, and yet a Hallmark phrase is not going to alleviate us from that pain, or not saying anything. And then it's like, okay, so is my grief too much for you? Or the phrase like, I can't even imagine. It's like, well, you could imagine, but it's really painful, so you don't want to. And so that's,
Yeah.
letting me know that maybe my grief is too much for you. And so I think keeping it really simple with like, this sucks. I'm so sorry that happened. This is so hard. Hey, and if you're like a doer person, like, hey, I'm making lasagna. Can I bring you an extra one? Or, hey, I'm going out for coffee. I'm going to swing by and I'm going to bring you a coffee. And if you want to chat, we can chat. Or if you just want to sit and be a bump on the couch, like I can do that with you. Just showing up and not being afraid to say our person's name, or just validate that this sucks. Like, you don't have to say, well, they're in a better place, or I'm sure it'll make sense someday. It's like, it's not going to make sense. And we don't know those things. And so, yeah, sorry. Again, I get soapboxy.
Oh, no problem. I do too. Yeah. I mentioned, on that other thing too about for the people who are around a grieving person, and my brother just came to me recently. His good friend lost his son just last week, and it was a terrible car accident. And so my brother contacted me and he's like, Tom, what's the right approach to take with this right now? I want to be there for him. I want to help him. I want to, I want to support him best I can. What are the best things to, how should I do this? And I just, without breaking it all down, I just said, be yourself, Jim. What kind of friend are you to him? Do you text him every day? Do you text him, once a month or whatever? Keep doing the same things. And he said, yeah, I'd send him a text and I showed my support for him and said, he might have said something to the effect of, let me know if I can help you or something like that. And I just said, don't be afraid to follow up. If you normally would, then go right ahead. Don't wait for them, because a grieving person is not going to be able to formulate what they need all the time. So, and they don't want to feel like they want to put other people out either. And so just be normal, be who you would be to them. And that's sometimes the best way.
Absolutely. Like, yes, we're going through this life altering thing and we still want the predictability and consistency of the people around us, right? So I love how you said that. Just be yourself, be normal. If you text once a week, text once a week, maybe throw in a little calendar reminder that like, okay, this is the grief anniversary date. And if I know their person's birthday, I might throw in that reminder in my calendar so I can send a different text on those days just to let them know I'm thinking of you and your person. But other than that, yeah, keep showing up in the ways that you normally would. I think that's a great reminder.
Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy Magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy Magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
And now back to our episode. Yeah, there's a funny example all the time where when I was in my worst phase and people were coming over to the house. It was very early on and all that. And I say, well, it's like I was at my own wake is what it was, because I was not there really.
Yeah.
And they're all there and I'm picturing all these faces just looking at me and talking at me, and all of this. And people have heard me say this before, but what would have been great if a friend just came in and said, Tom, I don't know what the hell to say to you, but you got a lot of food here. I'm hungry, be a normal friend. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, great, man, because the grieving person's world is rocked. It's already unstable. And if your friends are all unstable around you too, it only contributes to that. So try to be normal if you can and show your compassion and love the way that you normally would, I guess. That's all you can really do.
That reminds me of, so Gare died a week before Thanksgiving. And when it happened, my mom's one of 5. And so all the aunts and uncles and cousins all came to our house and everyone was just kind of there and nobody knew what to do. It was the first very significant loss in our family system. And we were all just kind of shell-shocked. And at the time I was working for Barnes & Noble, I was the district assistant. So I was supporting the district managers and the store managers, and we were prepping for holiday. And we were doing this. I remember we were doing a gift card promotion. And so they had a designated person in the stores to wear this. I had this idea to make an apron and kind of decoupage bedazzle it with a gift card and cut out little holiday shapes from fabrics and iron them on and decorate them with glitter, whatever. Anyways, it was a thing. And so what do we all do? I still have this visual of all my aunts sitting on the couch and we're all just cutting out these shapes from these fabrics to decorate these aprons, because I still had to get that done for work, and work was great and wonderful and gave me plenty of bereavement leave. But it was so nice to have something to do and to create. And they knew they were helping me in some way. But yeah, sorry, you mentioning that, like, well, they show up and it's like, well, what do they do? It's like, I'm so grateful that we got to decorate these gift card Christmas aprons
Yeah.
as
And
something to
understand that
do
it might,
together.
oh, sorry. Yeah. That you may, in the midst of that, it may seem frivolous because of the gravity of the situation, and
Yeah.
it does, and it is
Yeah.
really, but just do it,
Yeah.
because now you see the impact now on you, and as you look back at that and say, yeah, that was something that did help,
Yeah.
even
Well,
though
and
you
we
might
didn't
not
have to
feel it at the time.
talk, right? Like, we
Yeah.
didn't have to talk. We just could do something with our hands, and that felt good. Like, we're a fairly crafty-ish family. And so it was nice having something that wasn't connected with grief, that gave us an excuse to be together and supporting one another, but we didn't have to talk about things.
Yeah, that's a great connection. That's
Yeah.
nice. Very good. So the podcast you're doing, how long have you been doing that?
Well, I had the bee in my bonnet for a couple years, but I was afraid. Because there's still, even though I do grief work, there's still those stigmas around grief, and who's going to want to hear what I have to say. Anyway, so I started it in February of 2024. I have over 60 episodes out, and it's a combination of solo episodes and interviews with grief coaches, grief therapists, even just regular therapists who have a specialization or are able to speak to like a unique lens of grief, some authors. And yeah, it's all about normalizing the spectrum of grief, and both death and non-death losses, and providing resources, language, strategies, to just help us give ourselves permission to let our grief take up space.
I'll give you another parallel just happened, right? So that this is a synchronistic meeting here for sure. I had the idea for the podcast a few months after Jeff passed. It probably was in the later part of spring, almost early summer. He passed in February of 23. And so the podcast idea came, and the same thing. I shelved it for a while. It was there, and I knew I was going to do it, but in fact, I got some things set up. I got the Instagram page, that kind of stuff, even started seeking out some guests, and I had many lined up to be on or willing to be on. And then I just, for whatever reason, I was like, no, it's just not time. The summer was coming. I was still processing, obviously, and it just wasn't time. And so, yeah, it didn't start till the next year in late April, I think was the first one last year. So yeah, the same thing. I just felt that way, that it wasn't time yet, wasn't ready. And but in what you're saying too, there can never be enough resources out there. And it doesn't, you use the phrase that I don't know if anyone's going to want to listen to me or whatever. And it just doesn't matter. And this was said in our other meeting there too, where got to get everything out, just got to keep getting things out there and have it out there. And because, I hope people go to your podcast now and sign up for it and listen to it. And I don't care if they listen to yours and not mine. I don't care. That's not what, our hearts are in this for. And, that's the great part about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because someone might connect to something, that you uniquely can say and do. And so they'll feel seen in their grief that way. And I think because there is so much diversity and uniqueness in how grief shows up, there can never be enough resources. And I think we're still just so far behind in grief resources. Like, if you look at the UK, they are leagues ahead of us in offering grief resources and grief education in schools, like primary schools. They talk about it. It's so much more normalized and accessible, and yet there's still such a phobia and illiteracy here around grief in the States. And so I think there's plenty of pie to go around, like there's not a limited amount of people who can be reached through grief. Like, if even just one person benefits from what you're putting out there, like, in my mind, that's worth it. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so freeing too, that, you know, like I said, the competition aspect or agenda thing and all of that. And I still have to like just brush that off sometimes because, whatever. Sometimes I look at the numbers or whatever, and it's like, oh, or I think about I could do this, I could advertise it this way or do this. And I'm just like, no, that's not, it's not it. Just let it organically happen
Yeah.
and it will.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be where it is. And that's all. And so it's very freeing in that because, I love it too, because we're getting resources out there. And when people come to us, I have people, you probably do too. I have people who email me and they say, I really enjoy listening to your podcast. This is my experience. And do you know where I might find help with this or something? And it's so freeing just to say, yes, wait, I've got resources for you and I can give them to you. I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, here, these things are out here. I'm doing what I have to do for that. And that's easy, so it takes the onus off of me and I don't need to carry that either. So we all have our place, and here you are, you're a therapist for one-on-one things and stuff too. So, I don't feel that call, but there's place for that too. And everybody has their little place that they should be and follow it and go after it if that's where you're at with things. But, that's neat that there's just so many things out there. And I say it all the time. There's something for you out there, something that you can connect with. And, it's our place. We're trying to be part of helping that,
Absolutely.
So the podcast, and then you do your private practice you have?
I do. Yes. I'm licensed in Washington State, and I also am an authorization holder with SIPAC. So what that means is there are 42 states that are part of SIPAC. And so I can do virtual therapy with anyone in those 42 states, which is pretty cool. Thank you, COVID. And it's the same name, Grief is the New Normal Psychological Services. And I am like 95% virtual therapy and primarily do grief and trauma work. And yeah, I love it. That's where I'm at with that. Yep.
Yeah, it's neat with this stuff too, where you can do it virtually and everything, and people are more used to this now. And so, I mean, it makes it a lot easier too.
Yeah.
Folks, you can take that step. You can do it virtually too. You don't have to leave all the time because sometimes it's hard to find time, for to get somewhere.
Absolutely. So. Well, and grief is inconvenient when it shows up, right? Like it doesn't have this, there's nothing formulaic about it, and you don't know when it's going to hit. And so being able to have consistent times where you're talking through and processing, regardless of your work schedule, your lunch breaks, holidays, grief anniversaries throughout the year, like I think having a grief therapist or a grief coach can be really impactful in helping you move through your grief cycles, because we just keep cycling through these different feelings over and over again. And there's I love the visual of a tornado. You've got these little bubbles of emotions cycling through over and over again. And sometimes you're at the base in that eye of the storm, and they're just circling rapidly over and over again. You're cycling through those different emotions. And then over time, it's kind of like you're moving up the funnel, and those same emotions are cycling through, and some new ones are even getting swept up. You don't know what's going to show up next, and whether that's at work or in the grocery store. And so I think having a space to normalize, get support, get some different strategies to help you navigate that is really important.
Yeah, and while you're in that funnel, you get hit by a lot of things.
Oh my gosh, so many things. So many things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm picturing myself whack, in the head. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So I think I saw on your site too, you have a blog going too.
I have a blog. I don't post on it very often, but I did just start a Substack. So I'm doing a 50 days of grief conversation. So talking about some of the neuroscience around grief, integrating stuff from Mary Frances O'Connor and polyvagal theory, talking about the internal reorganization that our brains go through when we're grieving. It's like a whole new landscape. And so I'm on Substack. And then I also have a grief journal. It's called Authentically Unapologetic, a grief journal. And it's got grief check-ins. It's got a bunch of different exercises. So whether you're a clinician or a griever yourself, it's like 150 pages of resources to help you with processing through your grief. It's got the mourner's code in it, which I love, and some of my favorite exercises. Again, just trying to make grief more accessible.
Great. Yeah. Heather's links will be in the show notes. I always mention that. So
Thank
it'll all be
you.
available there. So we mentioned we're part of this book, the Stories of book. This is the third book that they've put out in this story. Have you been part of all of them? Did I gather that from have you been like a follow-up, the professional
Yeah, so I was
follow-up on
in
it?
the first one, Stories of Children Lost, as the grief expert at the end. So my chapter's at the very back of the book, and just talking about the unique challenges that parents go through when they've lost a child. Again, to try to create some normalizing and validating language, and provide some additional resources and strategies for coping, and talking about impact on family system and things like that. And then similar for Stories of Friends and Family Lost is I'm the grief expert at the very end of the book, talking about modern grief concepts, and again trying to create more language and strategies and normalizing, if you're in the midst of grief, is am I doing this right, and so having insights and language to help grievers feel seen.
Fantastic. That's great. I love how they set that up like that. That's good to have you kind of pull it all together, and go through all those stories. And yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's such an honor getting to be part of that project.
I had no idea, really. Like I mentioned, I've never been part of a book or anything like that. Never dreamed I ever would be for any reason. But realizing, how big it really is a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't think of myself as a big deal, and it's just like, then Trunis is like, yeah, we're going to do this live launch, and we're supposed to meet in New York City in July in front of Times Square and a billboard on it and all this and everything. It's like, wow. And the other two books, they both became New York Times bestsellers, didn't they?
They were Amazon bestsellers. I don't think they were
Amazon.
Yeah, they were Amazon bestsellers. I don't think they made New York Times bestsellers.
Yeah, that book's out today. This is May, what is 17th?
17th. Mm-hmm.
17th. Yeah, so it's out now. Again, those links will be there too, so you can follow up on that and see Heather's work in there too. So that's great.
Yeah.
Anything else you got planned or moving forward with anything? Have you thought about that at all? I'm sure you got enough to do.
I'm a little, I'm not going to lie. I'm busy. I have started getting into some speaking engagements. So I'm actually speaking at the National Practice Conference, put on by the National Register for Health Service Psychologists and the Trust, in October in Chicago, and super excited about that. And I've put on a couple continuing education classes, and I'm working on a grief retreat for healers. So those of us that are doing this work, my partner, Dr. Jessica Thomas, we're working on that coming out soon. And then I'm also launching later this month a professional grief collective. So for clinicians, coaches, healers who are wanting additional tools, resources, and support in growing their grief literacy to better meet their clients where they're at. So there'll be didactic calls once a month, some resources every month. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You got a lot going on.
And I have two tiny humans that definitely keep me busy at home as well.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody, you are going to want to keep track of Heather and find out what's going on. So make sure you go to the links and the site and everything where you can connect with all of her things for sure. So how often does your podcast come out? Is it weekly?
It's twice weekly. So
Ooh.
Mondays is usually a solo episode talking about a different aspect of loss. So I've been really trying to let non-death loss or ambiguous loss take up space. So like earlier this week, I think there was an episode on grief in retirement, grief on chronic illness. So these things where we're still here, but they're losses that are impacting our day-to-day experience, and they aren't always normalized as grief. We're so quick to label something as traumatic. And what if we're able to label it, well, maybe it's just unprocessed grief. And then on Thursdays, usually a new episode with an interview, either from someone in the grief community who is doing grief work.
Yeah, and you're on YouTube with those.
I am. So I have a YouTube channel, and I'm also on Instagram.
Okay, and all the podcast outlets, I would imagine.
Yes,
right?
yes, all major podcasty spaces.
And it is Grief is the New Normal.
Yes, sir.
That's the name of the podcast.
Yes.
All right, so people, go subscribe right now. Go right there and subscribe, whichever way you, whatever platform you like best. Make sure you do that. So anything else you want to cover, Heather, that maybe we didn't talk about?
I don't know. Do you have, I feel like I've fire hydranted you a little bit. So is there anything?
This is all about you. This is all about the people that I have on. That's another great freeing thing for me, where I don't just sit there and,
no pressure.
Yeah. It's like, no, let them roll. This is a commercial for you.
No, I mean, I feel like I've touched on all the things. I feel so honored getting to do the work that I do and support my clients. And, and I really hope we can, with shows like yours, help move the needle in normalizing grief and letting it take up more space, because it can feel so isolating when you're in it. And having access to people either geographically close or through social media, it can really help alleviate that isolation and that pain in feeling seen, and other people remembering your person. So yeah, thank you for this
great.
opportunity.
I love the term grief friends. We're grief friends.
Yeah.
And I would hope that whatever I do, for sure, and you certainly come across this way, is totally approachable, totally comfortable, and that's so needed. I mean, you don't want any like a clinical aspect to someone approaching you with that's probably what you experience with yours a little bit, with the therapists and stuff.
Oh, and they wasn't even clinical. It was just straight up avoidance. It was like, they didn't even know what to do with me. I was like, okay.
Oh my gosh.
Cool.
Such a horror story.
I try to make grief approachable. And that's something I've loved with Kara Sanchez with the Get Griefy community is, her tagline is like making grief cool. And it's, I think again, because it is, there can be color and joy, and finding that balance between grief work and restorative work, that life space. And it's important to find that balance, because if we're only in the grief sad space, we're forgetting what's keeping us here. And if we're only in the life space, we're not honoring the pain and our person and the grief we're holding in our bodies every day. So it's all about finding that balance between those two spaces. And I think by being part of these different grief communities, you're able to find that balance.
Yeah. And it's okay to have all of these feelings. I was thinking about that after we did the thing earlier, because I came across, and I kind of rewatched it, and I'm like, wow, I came across like really happy, and so I was like, and I thought about that, and I thought, it doesn't mean that I don't have the hurt. I have it all the time. And so it was just very interesting that we can carry all that, it's okay. You can carry joy. You can carry all of that. You're still gonna, the grief's going to be present with you. So it's okay to do that, and giving people the ability to see that, to do that is important, trying to help them to move forward in all of this. So it's, you can be positive, you can be, upbeat and all of that. And, I have a tremendous amount of sadness in me today, going through about the book and thinking about Jeff, to that depth in the midst of that. And so, I have a tremendous amount of sadness, but I also am positive, and I feel positive about things. So, I guess if you're out there and you're locked in stuff, just realize you have the capacity to have joy in your life too. We can do that.
Yeah. I always
Yeah.
think of that, the Inside Out movie, we call it the Feelings movie at our house. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a Pixar movie.
No.
And, one of the most beautiful things is at the very end, the main character is just really sad and she's able to feel comforted by her parents in this moment. So a new core memory comes in that's both a mix of sadness and joy. Whereas the entire whole previous part of the movie, all the emotions are just segmented and you're only feeling one thing. And so I think with grief, it's reminding ourselves that we can feel more than one thing. We have capacity for that, both and.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, anybody, you need some help, give Heather a call. She's not busy or anything. So. No, just kidding. Keep up the great work, Heather. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing the amazing work you're doing. And a pleasure to get to know you. And, I just love having people of your capacity, your empathy level, everything, to have as a reference, for people, to get them maybe where they need to be, especially, in the sibling aspect and things that still, even though we're making strides, there's still a lot to work through and have that becomes something that's more normal as well. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Tom. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and your son and to be able to collaborate with you on this.
Yeah, I have a feeling Garrett and Jeffrey are up there and they're like, yeah, we got them together. See, there we go.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, Heather, thank you. And keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.